So, welcome into episode 4 of the Fourth and Whinges podcast with your hosts, Mark and Rob. This week's podcast is going to be slightly different to what we've been doing before. We're going to do a mock draft. And so what we're going to do, the premise of this mock is that it's what we would do if we were the GMs of each of the NFL teams. So we're not trying to predict what we think is going to happen, although some of it may happen as we would do, but what we would do if we were the general manager. So no crazy comments on how ridiculous we are at predicting it, because it is about what we would do if we were the general managers. And we're going to swiftly go in. We're going to try and obviously do all 32 picks in one go. So we're going to try not to waffle on. Otherwise, it might end up being 2 or 3 hours long. And so with that, we'll go ahead. And I should point out that Rob's going to be picking the odd numbers. I'm going to be picking the even numbers as we go down. So it's just alternate picks. And we're going to be keeping track of it on screen through the PFF mock draft simulator. So we'll put in the details on YouTube. We'll kind of put a link in there in case anybody wants to kind of have a look at the simulator and have a go themselves. When we do put this live, so it'll be in there. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Rob, for the first pick.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. First off, I think PFF should start paying us some money, actually, the amount of times it's been mentioned in this podcast already. We should start keeping account. But yeah, without further ado, let's get on with the draft. So with the first overall pick of the 2021 Fourth and Whinges mock draft, the Jacksonville Jaguars select Trevor Lawrence, quarterback, Clemson. I know.
Wow.
I know. I went there.
You did go there.
Not too much to say on Trevor Lawrence, really. He's the presumptive number one pick. He was the number one recruit out of high school, out of Cartersville. He broke all of Deshaun Watson's passing records. He's, for me, I've wanted him since he first started at college. I'm absolutely made up as a Jags fan that we happen to be in position to pick him this year. Can't wait to see him next season. I was tempted to take Penei Sewell to give Gardner Minshew a bit more protection, but I thought I'd go for Lawrence.
No, as you say, it's kind of. I think he's almost been nailed on for the whole 12 months, or even maybe a couple of years. They've been saying he's going to be the number one pick. Nothing that we've seen in this offseason has changed anybody's minds there, I don't think. So I think it's the obvious pick, and there's not really much to say on that, is there? So with that, the Jets are on the clock, and I get to pick my favorite quarterback in this year's draft, Zach Wilson. I think it is again what I think is going to happen in the real draft, but it's worth pointing out. I think it's probably closer in my mind than I kind of tend to admit between Fields and Wilson. I think they wouldn't necessarily go wrong with either. But I think for me, Wilson, it's just the potential there and what I see in him. I see glimpses of the likes of Mahomes and Rodgers. And yes, you could argue it's 1 year of production to a degree at BYU, but I think he flashed as a freshman. And I do believe that there's some real talent there. And I think the Jets will go ahead and we'll pick Zach Wilson at number 2.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, Mark. His ceiling is incredibly high, I think. Number 2 pick for me, absolutely. So, okay. I guess we move on to pick number 3, which the San Francisco 49ers have traded for. So we've just mentioned him, or you've just mentioned him. So at this point, I'll be taking Justin Fields. So Justin Fields is the 3rd pick to the San Francisco 49ers. I think initially when they made the trade, there was a lot of noise out there about them taking Mac Jones. I think we touched on it sort of the last podcast, Mark, or you certainly mentioned it. Yeah. Maybe a bit of a smokescreen out there for that. I think it's incredibly close between Fields and Wilson. Prior to sort of this off-season, Fields was being mentioned in dispatches as being potential first overall to the Jags. Meyer's sort of coaching history, sort of with Ohio as well and everything. Obviously, that won't be happening, but he's a great prospect. He's got a lot of production. I think he played there for 3 years. It gives you that ability in the running game as well. He's very mobile, very accurate. I just think he gives you a lot more than Mac Jones, who perhaps is good from the pocket, but he's played in a very playing at Alabama. We've seen what's happened to Alabama quarterbacks. Just looking at Tua. Since he's coming to the league and he's struggled, and obviously that's not to say that no Alabama quarterback is ever going to make it in the NFL, but I just think Fields has got to be the pick, and we'll be seeing Mac Jones later on.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I think I'd be shocked if it's not Fields. I really will. I think there was definitely a smokescreen with the whole Mac Jones thing. I think they will definitely be doing the wrong thing if they pick him. I think we touched on it, like you said before, that for me, Mac Jones is too similar to what they've had in Garoppolo, in that he's more of a game manager and he doesn't really offer you any mobility. And yes, he might process well and quickly and all the rest of it, but the potential there with the mobility of Fields, I think, is just too much to pass on and take the risk that Mac Jones, with all that supporting cast at Alabama. Yes, he looked fantastic last year, but not enough to overtake Fields. No way, in my opinion. So I think it's 1, 2, 3. I'd be somewhat shocked if it didn't go like that on Thursday.
Yeah.
So that really gets us to the first kind of critical point. And again, we talked about this on the last podcast, that the number 4 pick is where it all really starts for us, isn't it? And I think what we've said here is, or I said this in the last pod, that if I'm Atlanta, I think I'm looking to trade out here. I don't want to pick number 4 overall because I'm not prepared to take a quarterback this year. I think Matt Ryan is owed too much money, and he's still got enough in the tank at this point to not want to be taking a quarterback this year, despite the fact that it is a good class for quarterbacks. You are still looking at the 4th quarterback at this point in this draft, and we all know from previous years that we all sit in at the beginning of each draft thinking the quarterbacks that year are really good, but how many of them actually pan out? And the chances of all 4 of these top-rated quarterbacks kind of panning out is top 4 or 5 is really slim. So some of these guys are going to be busts. They're not all going to pan out. So I just think it's too rich to pick one of these quarterbacks and have them sit at the moment when you've got Matt Ryan earning as much as he's going to be earning over the next 2 years. So I'm looking to trade out. So I'm looking for trade partners at this point from an Atlanta point of view. And I think you're sitting there down at number 9 with Denver, and I think you're very interested.
Yeah, John Elway, I think I'm very, very interested, especially in the passer that I think they'll look to target.
Yeah. So I think we're not fussed too much in terms of the mock that we're doing about compensation. I know people sometimes ask the question about, okay, so if you're predicting a trade, what's the compensation and how's that going to work? I think Denver will just need to get it done, whatever that is, whether it is this year's first and this year's obviously number 9 pick, next year's first, maybe a second this year or a third this year or something like that. Whatever it is, we're going to force it through for the purposes of this this mock by just swapping the pick 4 for pick 9, next year's 1, and we're just going to force it through on that basis because, again, we're not here to predict the terms of the trade, just that the trade will happen. So if we go ahead and do that, that now puts the Denver Broncos on the clock.
So I'm going to go slightly against what I said on the pod last week, but with this pick, I'm going to be taking Trey Lance. And I know. I said he scared me, and I know you would have taken Mac Jones. I think,
absolutely. Mark. Yes, absolutely.
I think I just think Trey Lance's potential upside is huge. I mean, like I said, he does scare me, but I don't like the Broncos, so I don't particularly care if it works out or not in this scenario. But he's joking aside. I mean, he's got all the tools, all the traits, all the talent is there. I think. Again, he's only played against the FCS competition. Not to repeat ourselves, he threw played one game this last season, which is very, very scary. It's just that one season from 2019 that he had that was incredible. He's got an absolutely massive arm on him. You put him in there, and you've got him throwing to Cortland Sutton, to Jerry Jeudy, like we mentioned last week, Hamler, Patrick, etc. You've got Noah Fant in there. Got Melvin Gordon at running back, who I'm less excited about, obviously, but he just wants to attack downfield. And I think everything that's on his tape, he's built like a tight end. He's got massive athleticism. He gives you that in the run game. I just think he's exciting, and he's somebody you can build around. And Mac Jones doesn't excite me. Whereas, Trey Lance might flame out, but I think you'd have fun watching him do it. Whereas Mac Jones would just be maybe more accurate, but slightly more pedestrian. So, controversially, I'm going to take Trey Lance at number 4 to the Broncos.
I think just before I solidify that for you, so can I not make the argument that will make? Well, it's not going to change your mind. You've obviously picked him, but do you not see? Because you're saying those things about Lance, and I agree. He's got a big arm. He can be slinging it up to all these weapons. But the pros of Drew Lock are that he's got a big arm. His issue is that he's not accurate, and I don't think Trey Lance is accurate. Now, obviously, Lance brings the rushing capability that maybe Drew Lock doesn't, and maybe he is just a better quarterback. I don't know, but I like you say, I would be scared to make this move. I really would. I think the upside is there, but they had Paxton Lynch, big arm, couldn't hit anything.
True.
Drew Lock, big arm, couldn't hit anybody.
There's Drew Lock. I've just seen nothing from Drew Lock.
Peyton Manning, Yeah. I know you can't compare. I'm not trying to compare anybody in this draft to Peyton Manning. Of course I'm not. But Peyton Manning functioned well in that offense. I don't know if it's the same offense, but for that team with a dicky arm after however many years in the league with his neck problems and stuff. I just think I can't see them going anywhere else. But Mac Jones would fit perfectly in that offense. He's more accurate and he can pro. But anyway, it's your pick. So I'll let you confirm Trey Lance. Yeah.
I'm going to go for it. I just think John Elway's a gunslinger, isn't he? He likes taking a risk, and I think he could well have fallen in love with Trey Lance. Like I say, Mac Jones doesn't excite me. Drew Lock has never done anything for me ever. I don't know. No. I couldn't tell you anything positive about Drew Lock. He just,
to be fair, what you've said there though, he's right that at the end of the day, yes, they picked Paxton Lynch, yes, they picked Drew Lock, and they did that probably because they liked the appeal of the big arm. So yeah, I suppose from that point of view, it does make some sense. So there we go, Trey Lance to Denver. Controversial indeed. You've got the odd picks, so you also have number 5.
Oh God, I'm back on the clock, aren't I?
Yeah.
I didn't think I'd get the opportunity to do this because I forgot about the trade potential. So this is massively my head ruling my heart. The pick here is Penei Sewell, but
wow,
is it though? Because we can pick up a tackle towards they're picking again at the top of the second. Give me Kyle Pitts.
Yeah.
Give me Kyle Pitts. I'm taking Kyle Pitts. I think we repeated ourselves a lot, but pair him with Joe Burrow, with Tyler Boyd, with T. Higgins, with Joe Mixon. Give him some throw at tight end. I think we touched upon it Thursday. They've got Riley Reif in there, or Riley Reif. I never know how to pronounce his name. Jonah Williams, who they drafted a couple of seasons ago. They have improved that line, and there is the possibility to pick somebody up, top of the second. But give me Kyle Pitts. Give me everything he brings, and I just think that would be so much fun to watch. So I'm going to take Kyle Pitts.
Right, I think I'm glad you went that way for Cincinnati's point of view. I think it's interesting actually because apparently the Bengals fans are a bit torn because you'll have seen probably if you watched any of their games at the end of last season that they had the Penei for your thoughts signs, didn't they, in the crowd for the last couple of games, obviously after Burrow got injured, and they were pushing strong for Penei Sewell at that time. I think for me, I probably in this scenario, if I was picking 5, I probably would have gone Pitts, but if I had, it would have been a flip of a coin for me between him and Jamar Chase, not Penei Sewell. I wouldn't be going Penei Sewell. Yes, they took T. Higgins last year, but for me, if you pair Higgins and you pair that with Chase and the relationship that Chase has from previous with Joe Burrow,
LSU.
I think you then get Tyler Boyd as your slot guy. Yes, they kind of are missing a tight end. I do agree with that. They're not exactly strong at tight end, but I think that wide receiving core would just be one of the best in the league at that point. And I think that's where I would go if it was me, potentially. But Pitts, I can see it. I can see the upside. Again, I'm not his biggest fan, but I can see the upside, and I can see why you've done that. The Bengals take Kyle Pitts at number 5. So that leaves me with the number 6 pick for the Dolphins. And if this is how the draft goes, the Dolphins have pulled an absolute masterstroke for me because
haven't they just? Yeah, I totally agree.
Picking at 3. Some people want to ding them for the second trade that they make, but for me, you look at it as one. You look at it as one move. It's almost like a 3-team trade. They've essentially gone from pick 3 in the draft to pick 6 in the draft. They're going to take the same person that I believe they would have taken if they'd have sat at 3 and taken a pick, and they've got an extra first-round pick for doing so. I think they've made an absolute masterstroke because for me, the Miami Dolphins at this point will take the best wide receiver since Julio Jones in my book. Jamar Chase is now a Miami Dolphin.
I can't argue with any of that, Mark. You've nailed it there for me, and totally agree with the pick. Absolutely.
So number 7, the Detroit Lions are on the clock.
This is where I struggled with the Lions. I was trying to think this through, and there are options. I mean, I don't think they would be against trading back.
No.
So if at this point, if Mac Jones is still available, I could see. I would say New England, but Belichick doesn't trade up, does he really? Generally,
no. I think that's the thing that I think as well. I think absolutely they would be wanting to get out of this pick. New England, in theory, is a perfect partner from the point of view that they surely want to do that. But does Belichick move up and give away future first-round picks? It's tough, isn't it?
Yeah, it is tough. The only thing that made me think he might was, obviously he's not getting any younger. How long does he want this rebuild to take?
Yeah.
Is he going to be around for much longer if he's putting a few future picks out there? But in this scenario, we'll stay put. I think Dan Campbell's obviously trying to build a team that's ultra aggressive, scaring teams, very, very strong in the trenches. He did that mental introductory press conference where he talked about hitting people, biting people's ankles, taking the legs off, etc. So I think he's probably going to go for one of the top defensive players on the board. So I am going to go defense here. I mean, obviously wide receiver is a consideration, but as we spoke about last week, I think it's very deep wide receiver. Whereas I think if you can go and get one of these blue chip defensive players, then you've potentially got a building block there for your defense. You've got a defensive leader. So I'm going to take Micah Parsons, linebacker, to the Detroit Lions.
I'm glad you went when you were saying blue chip defenders. I'm glad that Micah Parsons was the pick there, because I think he's the only one in my view that meets all of that kind of criteria that you mentioned about that kind of tough nose kind of thing. Yeah, there are some good corners potentially, but I don't unless you're talking JC Horn he's a kind of in your face defender, but I wouldn't necessarily, in my view, I don't think he's a blue chipper. I don't think he's worth the 7th pick in the draft. I think some people will have a problem with Micah Parsons going this high, number 7 for an interior linebacker, a middle linebacker or whatever, but I think he offers you some kind of blitz potential there, some get after the quarterback as well, and I think like you say, he kind of fits that mentality that they seem to be talking about. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if this is what happened. I think it's a good pick. He jumps off the tape when you watch his 2019 tape. For me, he looks
he's a beast,
like a linebacker, doesn't he? And
I think he finished 2019. He finished with the 3rd highest tackling grade in the entire country. So yeah, he's just a machine.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Good pick. So that leaves me on the clock now at number 8 with the Carolina Panthers. So this is really interesting because if you'd have taken Mac Jones at 4 and Trey Lance was on the board, I think I'd have been sprinting to the podium as the Carolina Panthers for Trey Lance.
Definitely.
Not that I'm the biggest fan, but I think he would, given what they've done at quarterback, he would in theory be able to sit for a few years. And they would be able to kind of get him ready for the NFL, which is what I think Lance needs. And that's why I worry a bit about him in if he was to go to Denver. But now that I'm left with Mac Jones as the 5th quarterback, I don't think I can do it. Because again, I think he's too similar to what you've just spent those draft picks on with Sam Darnold. So yeah, I don't think I can go quarterback. So on that basis, again, looking at the kind of potential needs here of wide receiver, tight end, cornerback, I'm clearly not going to take another tight end this high. There's no one that comes anywhere close after Pitts. Cornerback is a big potential with what we have here, but I want to be finding out about Sam Darnold, and so I'm going to go ahead and take Devontae Smith, wide receiver, Alabama.
Wow.
The Heisman Trophy winner. I think.
Did not see that coming.
So some people think that Jaylen Waddle's the better wide receiver this year from Alabama. Not for me. I think Smith, yes, his weight concerns me a little bit, but I just think he can give you it. He can give you production in so many different ways, and I want to see what Darnold's got, and I think he's the best option at wide receiver on the board at this point. I want to know what I've got in Darnold, and I want to know quickly. He's going to have Robbie Anderson. He's going to have Devontae Smith. He's going to have the guy who I always forget his name. So DJ Moore, yeah, as well. He's going to have McCaffrey. You know, we're going to know whether or not my opinion is right of Sam Darnold and he's a bust, or whether or not he can be an NFL quarterback. We're going to find out.
Right. Wow. No, giving Sam Darnold weapons. I like it. He'd have no excuses then. I thought you were going to go in a slightly different direction. I was going to take Penei Sewell at this point. Had I had the pick, just to give him a bit more protection. They've got Taylor Moton at right tackle. I think you could slot Penei Sewell in there at left tackle, and you've got Darnold a lot of protection. And, you've just listed the other weapons he has. So that's the direction I was going to go. But I'm sure the Carolina Panther fans would be very happy if they ended up with Devonta Smith.
They went very heavy defense last year, didn't they? I think
they didn't make any offensive picks last year. That every pick was a defensive player.
So I think this year you give him the weapons. You give him the weapons. You find out. That's what I'm all about. I think you find out soon on your quarterbacks, and if you give them all the weapons, like with Drew Lock with Denver, they've given enough weapons. They've given him enough time, in my opinion, to prove that he's not good enough. Move on, and I think that's what you do with Sam Darnold. You fill in with the weapons. That's something that didn't necessarily happen, to his credit, in New York. They didn't really do that in New York for Darnold, and I think that's what the Panthers need to do. So that's why I've kind of gone that way. So that leaves us with on to pick 9. So the Denver Broncos, the Atlanta Falcons traded down from 4 to 9, and they're now on the clock. So I had them at 4, so I'm gonna make that pick here. So having traded down, I've got my extra pick next year, plus whatever other compensation I managed to kind of wangle out of them. And I think at this point, I think I'm going to take who I've considered all along the best cornerback in this draft. Obviously, there was a lot of talk a few months ago, or up until maybe a month ago, that the cornerback out of Virginia Tech, Kayla Farley, was the best cornerback this year. And then his back problems have kind of taken some of the shine off that, and he's dropped down a lot of people's boards. But for me, Patrick Surtain has always been the number one cornerback in this draft. I think he's just so solid and so reliable. And for me, he plays in the SEC. He comes up against top quality wide receivers year in, year out, and I think he's so solid. For me, he's the best cornerback in this draft, and I think that's the move here for the Falcons for me.
Yeah, totally agree, Mark. That's exactly where I would have gone. I think they'll be very happy with that. They, I think, to me, need help at corner still. He's one of the top players one of the top players on the board everywhere you look. Definitely the top cornerback for me. I know you mentioned Farley after his back surgery, but yeah, no, it's a great pick, and I think Falcons will be very pleased if they're able to get some additional compensation and still pick up Patrick Surtain. Then they'd be very, very happy. Totally agree.
Potentially the Cowboys are miffed here.
I think the Cowboys might be miffed, yeah.
So we now move on to pick 10, Dallas Cowboys, and you've got this pick.
I think you've got this pick because this is.
Apologies, it is me, isn't it? Yeah, 3 in a row I've had. So as I said, I think I listened actually to a really good podcast that the Dallas Cowboys guys do. And they've been banging the table or a few of them have for Patrick Surtain pretty much all the off season, and so they will be very annoyed, I think, in this scenario if he gets snapped up at this point. They in their dream scenarios they're clamoring to some hope that potentially Kyle Pitts will be here at 10. So I don't know what they're smoking with regards to that. It's clearly a need for Dallas, and I think if you were to add somebody like Kyle Pitts, if that was to somehow happen, you'd have, along with their wide receivers and Dak, and I think it would be absolutely amazing to see that. But there's clearly no chance of that happening unless they're prepared to trade up. The worrying thing for me here is that I'm not as big on JC Horn as others. So I don't really see the value of cornerback here. This is a really tough pick for me. Then I don't believe we should be taking a chance on Kayla Farley just because of his back. For me, it's too scary. They've done that. They have got a bit of a history of doing that, of the Cowboys. They picked Jaylen Smith, the linebacker, a few years ago, who was a first-round pick, but because of his injury problems, he dropped to the second round. I think they got him in the second round. Yeah. And also Leighton Vander Esch, I think, has had neck problems in the past, but they took him at linebacker. So they're not necessarily scared of doing that, but I think it's too rich at number 10 to be doing that on somebody who, like Caleb Farley, even though he's clearly very, very good. But I just don't think I can pick a cornerback this high with Surtain off the board. So I'm torn. I'm torn here because for me, the Cowboys need help along their defensive line, both at edge and interior defensive line. Christian Balmore of Alabama, if his last 6 or 7 games had been how he played throughout the entire season, I think he'd been an absolute lock for this pick, because his last sort of 6 or 7 games, he just got better and better and better and better, and he looked awesome down the stretch. And then you've got the edge. The edge class is just so frightening. There's some great talent, but mixed in with, some real question marks across the edge guys. In my mind, I've got a clear edge number 1. But I think it's way too early to pick him. I'm really struggling.
I want to give it away, dear, for when we do our. You've got to be careful here.
I think in any case, it's way too early. It's way too early, I think, for any of the edge guys, in my opinion. Again, there's too many questions. I'm going to go Balmore. I don't think necessarily the Cowboys will see this as a particularly flattering pick, but I think it's something they desperately need. They desperately need help on the defensive line, and the edge just is too scary for me. I'm going to go Balmore, Christian Balmore, Alabama.
Okay. I thoroughly enjoy watching you sit and squirm over that pick. That was.
I took myself out of the thing there with the pick before, because Satan, I think, is who they'll end up with. I think it will fall where Satan ends up as a Dallas Cowboy. I really do. But I think, Atlanta, I think, moving down in that way, I think that's what they would be looking for. And I think, I did myself out of the pick there.
But you had to make it. But I do think the Cowboys, the only thing I thought there was you just go best player available, or then arguably that would be Penei Sewell at this point. You start rebuilding that offensive line. You give Dak some more protection. Give maybe Zeke some bigger holes to run behind. Would that be somewhere you could go? Not necessarily a massive need, but maybe getting older there. They've lost a few players over the past few years, and start getting somebody there that could anchor it.
Yeah, potentially. I think it's a good shout. Actually, I think it's probably somebody I should have maybe talked about. And I think the reason I still wouldn't go there for me is I think they've spent a lot of talent. They've spent a lot of picks on the offensive line over the last few years, and at one point, that stood them really well, and obviously made Zeke look good and all the rest of it. But I think Dak's the type of quarterback that can make things happen without necessarily the best offensive line. And I think with getting some of their players back, I think they'll be all right on the offensive line. I think there's again some more talent they could pick up later on in the draft. I just think that defensive line is so poor. That's why they were so poor last year. It was the defense. They were flying, scoring so many points when Dak was healthy and everything. And I think their defense was what let them down. And they can't stop anybody on defense, or they couldn't do for large parts of last year. And I think that's where they will be concentrating most of their picks. And obviously, as it's turning out, Penei Sewell is taking something of a slide down our
we're saying a video has emerged of him wearing a gas mask bomb just slightly before the draft started, and he's there.
I hope not for him, because that would mean that he ends up in Houston, which would be horrendous to end up. But yeah. So we're, I guess, should we just recap then? Because that's the first 10 picks, because obviously most people will probably be listening to this rather than watching. So we'll just recap the top 10. So we had at number 1, no surprise, the Jaguars take Trevor Lawrence, quarterback, Clemson. Number 2, the New York Jets take Zach Wilson, quarterback, BYU. Pick 3, the San Francisco 49ers take Justin Fields, quarterback, Ohio State. Pick 4, we have the Denver Broncos trading up to number 4 to take Trey Lance, quarterback, North Dakota State. Pick 5, we've got the Cincinnati Bengals taking Kyle Pitts, tight end, Florida. With the number 6 pick, we've got Jamar Chase going to the Miami Dolphins, the wide receiver out of LSU. At pick 7, we have the Detroit Lions taking Micah Parsons, linebacker, Penn State. Pick 8, we have the Carolina Panthers taking Devontae Smith, wide receiver, Alabama. Number 9, we've got the Falcons, after trading down, taking Patrick Surtain II, the cornerback out of Alabama. And we have 3 Alabama picks in a row as the Dallas Cowboys take Christian Balmore, defensive interior, Alabama. So that leaves us at number 11 with the New York Giants on the clock.
This one's simple for me. Dave Gettleman loves a big man. They've definitely got a need there. This is where Penei Sewell's slide ends for me. If Dave Gettleman can get Penei Sewell at 11, he is absolutely laughing. He would absolutely love this. He'd be sprinting to the podium to hand this pick in. So I don't think I need to say too much more about it. But yeah, he's had a bit of a slide. I guess the knock on him is that he's maybe played a season and a half. He opted out last season, but that when he was 19 years old in 2019, he was absolutely his movement. He's 330 pounds, but he's still very, very fast, very, very quick. A very big guy. He won't even turn 21 until the season starts, I don't believe. So I think you lock him up there. You've got Daniel Jones is depend how long Daniel Jones lasts for, but he'll have no excuse then. He's got a premium left tackle. I was toying with the idea of Jaylen Waddle, which I think they'd also be quite happy with, but for me, they addressed Golladay. They got Golladay in free agency. They've got some weapons there for Jones. But yeah, for this one, Penei Sewell all the way, especially knowing the GM.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you say, that's where they would be absolutely laughing at this point. I think there's a lot of talk about them going wide receiver potentially if Waddle's there. I think yes, Jaylen Waddle in theory is going to add value to that team, but they've got a lot at wide receiver when you think about it already. And I think absolutely that if either of those two tackles, the top two tackles, are there, I think they're laughing. And I think Penei Sewell or Rashawn Slater of Northwestern, I think if either of those tackles are available, they should be going there, in my opinion. So Penei Sewell at number 11 is a great pick. So we've got number 12 now, with myself picking for the Philadelphia Eagles. So I think I mentioned this when we touched on it in a previous podcast, that I think the Eagles did the wrong thing, in my opinion, by trading down and looking to go with Jalen Hurts at quarterback. I think it was the wrong move, but they've done it now, and they're sat here at number 12, and I've got to deal with the consequences as their GM now. Mac Jones is still on the table at this point. I think if we get into this level of the draft, pick 12, it wouldn't surprise me if there was further trades at this point. I could see potentially New England here at this point looking to come up. Washington potentially, but of course the Eagles aren't going to trade with the football team. The Bears at 20, would they make a move at this point to come up to try and get Mac Jones? I don't know. But I think at this point, I think when the fact that they've moved down to 12, they've got their extra picks, maybe they will want to make a pick at this point. And I think, again, there's with the whole adage of finding out what you've got at quarterback, I think you've got to give him some support. And with Jaylen Waddle on the board at this point, I think this is where I'm going to go. I think get the ball out of Jalen Hurts' hands quickly, screen game, that kind of thing. Give Waddle the ball on jet sweeps, that type of thing. Let's give Jalen Hurts some real help at wide receiver. And I'm going to take Jaylen Waddle, wide receiver, Alabama.
Yeah, totally agree. That would be the exact pick I would make here. You're right. I mean, Jalen Hurts doesn't fill me with confidence, but that's the road they've chosen to go down. They have added a lot of picks next year, potentially. So I think they could have 3 first-round picks next year. So let's see. I don't, if maybe Spencer Rattler comes out, has a great season at Oklahoma. Or Sam Howell has a great season at North Carolina. I think they're probably at the moment the top 2 quarterbacks. So perhaps they end up in a position to either trade up or to take one of those. They can maybe address quarterback next year. But yeah, you're right. You've got to give Jalen Hurts a chance. They've had a lot of injuries at wide receiver. They've had a lot of drops from Nelson Aguilar in the past. So you give Jalen Hurts a bit of speed to give him, one of the top remaining wide receivers in this draft, and see how he goes. Like you though, Mark. I don't think that's an experiment that's going to have a happy ending. But for the time being, I think that's absolutely the pick. Yeah,
absolutely. I think all they're doing is they'll be sitting on Jalen Hurts for a year, and we'll find out next year which quarterback they like in next year's draft. That's what we'll find out. But at least at that point, you get a quarterback in. If it's next year, then again, you've still got in theory a top class wide receiver and weapon there in Jaylen Waddle. So I think it's a good pick. So pick 13, the Los Angeles Chargers.
So pick 13, Los Angeles. I think this probably is quite another simple one for me. You seem to have had the thinkers, but at this point, again, if I'm Tom Telesco, I'm thinking I absolutely nailed my pick last year. I've got Justin Herbert. He's absolutely set. If there were one of the top wideouts still on the board, then maybe that would be a consideration. But at this point, I think you've just got to do what you can to protect Herbert. And I don't think there is really that much between Penei Sewell and Rashawn Slater out of Northwestern. So in this instance, I'm the Chargers. I'm taking Rashawn Slater. I'm slotting him in at tackle, and I'm giving Justin Herbert some more protection. I just think he looks to be a great prospect. Like I say, a bit of a toss-up between him and Penei Sewell. I've seen other mock drafts where Slater's gone over Sewell. I think he had, just think he's a very, very good player. I think he'll be a very strong tackle in this league for a long time. I think he can play anywhere along that line. I don't think you have to worry about, is he a tackle? Could you put him in at guard? Could you stick him at guard for a year and move him to tackle? I think he just gives you that flexibility. So, another easy pick for me. Let's protect Justin Herbert and get Rashawn Slater in.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think I've mocked Slater to the Chargers a few times over the past few months. I think it's a great fit. It's kind of best player available at a spot of need. I think it's an ideal situation for the Chargers. I think they'd be sprinting the picking.
Yeah, definitely.
So pick number 14 then with the Minnesota Vikings. I think they'll be quite annoyed at this point because I think tackle is a need here in Minnesota, along with guard, along with edge. I think they need some real edge help and safety as well. I think the safety class, in my view, is not great. There's certainly not too many kind of like big time names in the safety outside of the TCU corner, Morig. I suppose they could go there, but I've mocked a few times, and I think this is where I'm going to go with this pick. I think the Vikings, with Zimmer at head coach, he likes his edge defenders. He likes to get after the quarterback. I think this is where they'll go. Obviously, I don't know about where they will see some of these players, and again, I'm not that high on the kind of schemes that some of the other NFL teams kind of run. So I don't know if who I pick here will necessarily be a scheme fit for them, but I'm just going off who my number one edge player is in this draft. So yes, I am probably giving something away here. Doing it in the spirit of what this mock is about. And my top edge player in this draft by far really is Azeez Ojulari, edge of Georgia. So that's where I'm going to go. It's a huge reach here according to how PFF have got them graded. But that's where I'm going. I think he looks, when I put on the tape for edge players, for me, edge players should pop off the screen. You shouldn't have to be asking where they are. And when you put tape on of the Bosa brothers and Chase Young and Myles Garrett, they jump off the screen. Nobody needs to tell you who that player is. And out of everybody in this edge class, the only player that popped off the screen when I watched the tape was Ojulari. Yes, he might not be an ideal size, and he might not be as good in the run potentially, whatever. But I want him to go and get the quarterback, and I think he's the best edge defender for doing that in this year's draft. So that's who I'm picking for the Vikings.
I commend you there. I had a sneaking suspicion that it was Ojulari, but obviously I didn't know. And I commend you for sticking to your guns. And if you've got somebody you like, and who's to say that the Vikings don't feel the same? I think they absolutely, in this scenario, they definitely go edge. I think probably from my point of view, I've gone Jaylen Phillips. But I'm not going to argue with you, Mark. You've obviously seen a lot more of Ojulari than I have. And edge is the pick.
The injury scares me a little bit with
yes.
Phillips. I think he's probably my second in terms of pure talent. I think he's my second edge, but the injury scares me. But I also have Ojulari ahead of him. So, but yeah.
No, good pick. I like it. Stick it to your guns, and brilliant. Definitely edge. Definitely what they need. So I know that they've not. I don't think Daniil Hunter's gone yet, has he? But he's at the force he once was. So definitely edge. Yeah.
Okay, so pick 15, the Patriots. Wow.
Here we are. I think this might have played right into Big Billy's hands here. I think. As we've already discussed, I'm maybe not as high on him, but I think if this happens again, it's another one where he's sprinting to the podium or skipping, and I think they take Matt Jones at this point. I think this is where Matt Jones goes if he's still available. For everything we've just said, try and sort out that quarterback position, somebody they can work with. But again, very straightforward. I feel like I'm not really giving you much here, but I think we've already kind of spoken about most of it. Yeah. So Matt Jones, Alabama, goes to the Patriots. Yeah,
I think if this scenario was to work out, I think, like you said, Belichick, he's just like, how has he managed this? Not having to trade up Because I think if they end up with Mac Jones, they'll have had to have traded up to kind of do it. I just think quarterbacks,
I agree.
Quarterbacks, kind of carry that kind of need to trade up for them if you believe in them 100%. I don't think there's any way if he fell that they wouldn't take him. So I think, I think like you say, it's a fairly straightforward pick, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
So pick 16, then the Arizona Cardinals are on the clock. So this is a bit of a tough one for me. I'm not a massive. I don't watch a lot of Cardinals football. I'll be honest with you. They're one of the teams that I don't know as much about. And in a lot of mocks that I've done here, I've gone defensive interior. This is where Balmore's come off for me in a lot of other drafts. And I don't see another interior defender that I rate this highly. So I can't go defensive interior. PFF are saying here that tight end and cornerback are their other needs. On that basis, I think I have to go cornerback. I think there's nobody. I don't think there's anybody sort of best player available that's jumping out here. Is there tackle, safety? No, I think I'm going to go. I think I'm going to go cornerback.
Which one
would they? Yeah, exactly. Would they go? Would they chance it at number 16 on
Farley?
I don't think so. I think
depends on what they know about the medical situation. Obviously, that we touched
it's tough,
upon,
isn't it? With mocks, it's really tough because we don't know the medicals. They might think that his medical is clear, and if it is, Farley's probably the pick. But on the basis that it doesn't sound good from what I've heard, I'm gonna play it a little bit safer, and I'm gonna go JC Horn, cornerback, South Carolina. Again, he's somebody that I don't think he's necessarily technically as good as some of the other guys, or even maybe athletically, but he's very much an in-your-face kind of press man corner. He likes to bully wide receivers and that kind of thing. And I think there's obviously a need there. I think Peterson's moved on, hasn't he? Patrick Peterson, and I think that if he turns out to be a half decent cornerback, I think it's obviously a great position of need. So yeah, we'll go JC Horn there, cornerback, South Carolina.
Yeah, I think that's exactly where I would have gone, to be honest, Mark. It's Farley's second back surgery, isn't it? I don't think I'll be taking him at all in this mock. I think I would be leaving him to the second round, just given those injury concerns. As you say, JC Horn, he's aggressive, he gets in people's faces, things a little bit rough around the edges, but he probably is the second cornerback second best cornerback at the minute. So
some scouts out there, some analysts love him, and he's shot up some boards, and again, I haven't watched that much of his tape. I'll be honest with you. Cornerbacks are a position that I struggle to scout because we don't see the all 22 tape. So a lot of the time when you're trying to watch the videos and stuff, they're never on the screen until the ball's in the air. I think it's a really tough position for like amateurs like us to scout. I really struggle with it. So it's kind of really difficult for me to evaluate corners. But from what I'm hearing, he's a good prospect. So that's kind of my pick there. So we're on to pick 17, the Las Vegas Raiders. I nearly got that wrong then. The Las Vegas Raiders are on the clock.
I think this is where it starts to get tricky for me. This is probably one where I'm going to struggle and maybe go backwards and forwards a bit. I think the thing with the Raiders, I'm not really sure what their plan is.
I'm not sure they are.
No, I don't feel like Mike Mayock come in. He's made some very strange decisions. I don't know who, Gruden's probably the one pulling the strings there. But this offseason, they've traded away. They had quite a strong offensive line, and then they go and trade Gabe Jackson to the Seahawks for Rodney Hudson, the center. I don't really know why you would do that, and for very little return. So to me, that's a strength, and you keep hold of that. So I am tempted to sort of look at tackle, and Christian Darrisaw's sitting there. I think he'd be a good pickup for them. I guess sort of, do they go for something splashy? Do they go edge? Do they go Quitty Pie? Do they go Gregory Rousseau? Do they go Jaylen Phillips? I mean, they've got Max Crosby. They've picked up Yannick Ngakoue, so I think probably they're covered there. Looking at the board, I mean, the other one that jumps out to me is Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah.
Easy for you to say. JOK, we're calling him, yeah?
Yeah, I like that. So JOK. Gus Bradley is the new defensive coordinator there. He likes a lot of speed, athleticism, and good coverage linebackers, which I think is what JOK gives you. I think. Oh, this is so difficult. I think Darrisaw probably makes the most sense, but I think I'm going to go JOK at this point.
Yeah.
Give them a coverage linebacker, and see what else they do on the offensive line. I know they timed up Colton Miller earlier in the off season with a longer term deal. Maybe that's an area they look to address later in the draft. So I think JOK is he's a very good prospect. He's probably gives you something a bit different. I think there are, other tackles that might be available later on in the draft. Is there going to be another linebacker there that's probably at JOK's level? Maybe not. So I'm going to go Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah from Notre Dame to the Las Vegas Raiders.
Nice. It's an interesting pick. I think he's a very unique player in a sense. His coverage skills, like you say, are pretty amazing. He plays almost like a safety, in that he covers a lot of the slot wide receivers and things and tight ends, and he's definitely got a skill set that would be very useful in that division. You've got the likes of Hill and Kelsey to be defending, and I think he'd be a really good pick there. Like you say there, I think it's tough to understand to predict what the Raiders will do. They could go anywhere for me. They really could. I think Morig, the safety, is in play for me potentially. And like you said, Darrisaw, I think they'd be very keen on Darrisaw. But I think Owusu-Koramoah is a great player. It's a good pick. So that leaves us me with pick 18 now for the Miami Dolphins. So this is a fairly straightforward one for me. It's one of the straightforward ones, I think. So obviously, just scooting back up to recap. Obviously, we have the Dolphins taking Jamar Chase, wide receiver, earlier on in the draft. A thing that you said at the time there was that potentially you would have gone Penei Sewell to. I think you might have said that, or certainly that's something that again I did contemplate. They've got a bit of a need there at tackle, and I think with what in many people's mind is the third graded tackle in this class still left on the board in Christian Darrisaw from Virginia Tech. I think that's probably where I'm going to go here. He was graded the second best tackle in the league last year, with a 95.6 grade there from PFF, which is impressive. He's a big guy. He looks like a real talent at tackle, and I think whether he goes in at left tackle or right tackle there in Miami, I'm not exactly sure, but either way, I think he's a great player, and again, he's going to be somebody that will help us to see how and if Tua is the real deal, because as you know, I'm not very high on Tua. I think I would have gone in a different direction straight away. If I was Miami right from the get-go, I would have stuck up there at the top of the draft and taken a quarterback personally. But they obviously want to try and get what they can out of Tua, and I think with a wide receiver like Chase and now adding a top tackle prospect like Darrisaw, I think again he's not going to have any excuses this year. Tua. No,
I think it's a great pick. Yeah, I think previously on a podcast I said I didn't really have Vera Tucker making it past this point due to Miami, but the fact that Darisaw still on the board, yeah, I think he goes here. Definitely, I don't think he'll had a sack or a hit all of last season. He's very good, great blocker. Great pick. I don't think there's anything more to add to it than that. You give two of that protection, and you wait and see how it goes. So yeah, great pick that.
Okay, so we're now at pick 19. The Washington football team are on the clock.
I'm glad you said football team because I keep wanting to say the other thing that we're not allowed to say anymore. So I think here this is probably fairly simple for me at this point. I think again.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's not splashy. It's not exciting, but it's where I can see them going. I think obviously they've got Fitz in there at the moment. Not really doing anything in that quarterback position. I think Washington would potentially be in the mix to trade up if some of the prospects were to slip a bit further down the board. I don't think this is really a great spot for them. Obviously, they were largely terrible last year and just snuck into the playoffs by dint of that division being absolutely awful.
Yeah.
I think they need to upgrade their offensive line for me. They're told of Brandon Scherf with a franchise tag, and I think at this point I've just mentioned him. I'm going to take Elijah Vera Tucker, offensive line out of USC. He's very versatile. You can put him along that line at tackle or at guard, and again you've got hopefully one of those spots on the offensive line locked up for a number of years. If next year you end up taking a quarterback, I think you're all the better for this pick. There's nobody else that really jumps off at me. I was tempted to maybe go wide receiver at this point, maybe Rashad Bateman to pair with Scary Terry, pair with Terry McLaurin. I'm going to stick with Vera Tucker and upgrade that offensive line, I think, at this point.
Okay. Yeah, no, I can see the logic. I do. I think I would have potentially gone the other way there. I probably would have gone wide receiver.
Yeah.
Because, I think maximize what you've got this season potentially with Fitz, because Fitz is going to throw the ball around. He's going to throw it everywhere.
Absolutely.
But I think if you're looking potentially more longer term, potentially, the tackle is a better pick longer term. Like you said there, I think they're in a bit of a difficult position here, kind of middle of the pack, and that ideally we want to be picking earlier and try and get in that quarterback hunt, but I just don't think it's going to happen. I think they're too far down, as with the next pick with Chicago, I think, to be making any moves unless one of them goes absolutely crazy and packages up some crazy amount of picks on draft night. I think they're going to end up being kind of stuck middle of the pack and picking from tackles or wide receivers or cornerbacks or something like that at this point in the draft. Okay, so that, as I said, that leaves now me with the pick number 20 for the Chicago Bears. And as I touched on there, they're in a similar boat as the football team, with needs a quarterback, at wide receiver, potentially on the offensive line as well. This is another tough one for me from the point of view of listeners to this podcast, because I'm probably going to go wide receiver here. And am I going to show my hand a little bit? Because Bateman's not my number one wide receiver at this point.
Bateman is not my number one wide receiver at this point either, to be brutally honest.
So I think if I'm being honest and true, I can't take Bateman because he's not my number one wide receiver. Who's left?
I will tell you who my number one wide receiver is first, if you like.
Yeah, feel free.
I don't know if it's going to be the same or if it's going to be different, but I would be looking to take Elijah Moore, I think.
I think we're in the same boat there. I think we both see a lot in Elijah Moore. It's very close with my two wide receivers here. I'm a big Elijah Moore fan. I'm also a massive Terrace Marshall fan. I think
I get that. I can see that.
To have got the production that he got over the last couple of years with the likes of Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, he was on that team and was holding his own to a degree. And getting touchdowns, getting touches when both of those were playing in 2019. This year, he's kind of obviously moved up to the top of the wide receiver depth chart and looked like an absolute beast. He's always scored touchdowns through high school, through college. He's a big wide receiver. There's rumors that there potentially might be an injury concern for Marshall, I've heard. Is it a knee potentially? I can't remember what I heard, but I did hear something in the last few days that potentially there's something that's come out of the combine for him. So that might drop him down, and that's certainly why I'm not going to be picking him here, because of that. That is a little bit concerned, because as I say, I've got Elijah Moore and Terrace Marshall very closely ranked. But I'm going to go wide receiver out of Ole Miss, Elijah Moore. He's people saying that potentially the knock on him is that he's just a slot at the next level. I wouldn't be so quick to say that. I still think he's got the potential. He's got the hands and he's got the contested catch ability for me to potentially play out wide. But at the end of the day, if he turns out to be, a top 5 slot receiver in the league, I still think that's good value at this point. And I think any help that you can get the Bears wide receivers, they've got Robinson, yes, but outside of Robinson, what realistically have they got there? And I think he would be a massive help in Chicago. So I'm going to go Elijah Moore.
Yeah, I love it, Mark. That's where I would go. I think, you've got Robinson there, like you just said. They've got Darnell Mooney, who sort of emerged a little bit towards the end of last season as more of a deep threat. You put Elijah Moore in there, you put him in the slot. I think he does have it. He can play outside. He played there a handful of times last season. I just think he's incredibly tough. He's maybe not the tallest, but he's a great route runner as well. Yeah. He only had 2 drops last year on what's he got? And he's got 10 on 200 catchable targets in his career. He's a focal point of that offense. Very good on the screen, gives you a lot of yards after catch as well. I really rate him. He would be my top at this point. I liked your Terrace Marshall analysis as well. Again, I think he's very good. He's got the height. Better on the contested catches, but not only does he have the height, he's got a bit of the speed as well. I think he sat out his senior year at high school. I can't remember what the injury was, but I think there is something. I think his ceiling is incredibly high, but there is maybe just that little bit of an injury concern. So I love the Elijah Moore pick.
Just whilst we're talking about the kind of the wide receivers here, and the fact that PFF are very high on Bateman compared to a lot of other people. I think a lot of other analysts don't have Bateman rated as highly. What's your take on him? Why is it that he's not kind of the choice here for you?
I was thinking what I was going to reply then, and the first thing that came into my head was I don't necessarily have much of a knock on Bateman. I just think that probably Marshall and Moore are better, and I just think it's probably that simple. But I've probably watched more of them, to be honest. I think, like you said, with Marshall, and not to go back over that analysis, but what he managed to do there at LSU and everything with Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. And then I really, really, really do like Elijah Moore. I think, Bateman would be a very good receiver in the league. I don't think there's anything wrong with him as such. He's just probably prefer the other two. He's maybe a bit on the slow side, I would say, for Bateman. Maybe a bit slower than what you would want. But I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, for me, it's kind of like what I touched on before about when I was watching the edge classes. I love watching wide receivers. They're obviously one of the better and easier positions for us to scout as amateurs with the tape that we get. And again, like edge, a wide receiver for me should pop. You should know who the number one wide receiver is in a team. And for me, maybe it was the changing of numbers or what, but because I think he played with one number for a couple of years and another. But whenever I'm watching Bateman kind of tapes, I can't find him. I don't know where he is. He just doesn't jump off the screen for me. I struggled with it. I struggled with it. I just don't see it. I'm not saying he's not a good wide receiver. He's clearly a good wide receiver, but for me, he's not better than the ones that have already come off the board, or Elijah Moore or Terrace Marshall, and he just doesn't pop for me. So just to recap then, for the last 10 picks, we have at number 11, Penei Sewell, tackle out of Oregon, going to the New York Giants. At pick 12, we have Jalen Waddle, wide receiver, Alabama, going to the Eagles. Pick 13, we've got the tackle from Northwestern, Rashawn Slater, going to the LA Chargers. Pick 14, we've got Azeez Ojulari, the edge defender from Georgia, going to the Vikings. Pick 15, we have Mac Jones falling to the Patriots, quarterback, Alabama. Pick 16, we've got J.C. Horn, the cornerback from South Carolina, going to the Arizona Cardinals. Pick 17, we've got the Las Vegas Raiders taking Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, the linebacker from Notre Dame. Pick 18, we've got tackle Christian Darrisaw, Virginia Tech, going to Miami Dolphins. We've got pick 19, the Washington football team, taking Elijah Vera-Tucker, the tackle out of USC. And pick 20, the Chicago Bears taking Elijah Moore, the wide receiver out of Ole Miss. So that takes us to pick 21. The Colts are on the clock.
So I've been backwards and forwards with the Colts a bit. I think they've got a few needs. I think they've definitely got a need at tackle. Obviously, bringing in Carson Wentz this offseason, you would potentially look to protect him as much as possible, given the problems he had last year. They lost Anthony Castonzo, the left tackle, to retirement in the offseason. They've not adequately replaced him, so that was something that kind of came into my mind. Also, I think edge is a massive need area for them at the minute. They lost Danico Autry to Tennessee in the offseason. Justin Houston is still a free agent, I believe. I don't think they've re-signed him. So they're struggling at that position at the moment. Did a little bit of looking into it at the moment. They've got a guy called Isaac Rochelle, who has spent 4 seasons at the LA Chargers, drafted by them in the 7th round in 2017. And over 4 seasons with them, he's done 9.5 sacks, 10 tackles for loss, and 12 QB hits. So I don't think he's going to be really keeping anybody out of the team too much. So I've decided to go edge.
Okay.
Some consideration. I was looking at potentially who's doing tackles. I do quite like Tevin Jenkins out of Oklahoma. There's a few tackles there. I think that's probably a position to look to address later on in the draft. To be honest, I think there's reasonable tackle depth in this draft and sort of previous years. So the Colts with this pick for me are going to be taking, and again, it could be any edge. It depends how you have them on your board. I'm probably going for one that other people have lower down their board. So I'm going to go with Jaylen Phillips out of Miami. So Jaylen Phillips from Miami, edge rusher, goes to the Colts.
Yeah.
There's obviously some fitness concerns with him. He did quit football after a spate of injuries when he was at UCLA. Then he transferred to Miami, but he had a fantastic season last season. He got 23.5 sacks, tackles for loss. He had a fantastic pro day that we discussed a couple of weeks back. I just think he's a great player. He's very quick. He's very powerful around the edge. I think he could be a massive difference maker. I mean, the injuries are a concern. He could blow up slightly, but that's probably why he's still there at 18. But at this stage of our draft, but I think he's worth taking a punt on. And for me, he's definitely better than Russo. He's fellow sort of Miami alumni. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I like the pick. I agree. I think the edge is a big need. I think I'd be tempted by wide receiver. I think again we touched on it in a previous podcast when Wentz had success at the Eagles, it was throwing to those big-bodied wide receivers, and I think he would benefit from that. And I think if I remember rightly, we've still got Terrace Marshall on the board at this point, so I would have been tempted by him. But I do agree that edge is a big need, and we seem to be aligned certainly on the edge of players remaining. And again, outside of the injury, I think Jaylen Phillips is my number one edge potentially, or is certainly rivaling Ojulari. So I think at this point in the draft, yes, he could have injuries concerns down the line, but he's definitely a very good choice there. I think for Miami, for the Colts from Miami there. Jaylen Phillips. Yeah, I like that pick. Okay, that takes us to pick 22, the Tennessee Titans, same division. And I think, in a way, yeah, this is something of a tough one for me again, because you'd think their immediate need would be wide receiver, and I'm very tempted to go wide receiver. Obviously, they lost. Corey Davis. Yeah, Corey Davis, who was kind of he was the number 2 to AJ Brown, and I'm tempted to go there, because outside of Moore, AJ Moore now, they've not really got that much at wide receiver. So I'm tempted by that. I'm also tempted by tackle. I think again they could do with some help at tackle along the offensive line altogether. Really, we do still have Tevin Jenkins, like you mentioned. You're high on Jenkins, probably slightly higher than me, but he is still on the board. Oh God, it's tough. Again, we've got Rondell Moore, who I like as a bit of a slot and a bit of a gadget wide receiver. It's probably a bit too early for that.
Remember, they did sign Josh Reynolds in the offseason. He could be a game changer for
them. But again, I've got that slight concern over Terrace Marshall's injury, and Bateman. I'm just not that. I'm gonna go Marshall. This might be my heart leading my head slightly here, because I am a big Terrace Marshall fan. But I think that big body. He can also play in the slot, though. Played a bit in the slot at LSU. Did Terrace Marshall? He looks like the real deal. Obviously, as I said, there is this potential. I think it's a knee problem that showed up in the combine part of this year. But that's what I'm going. I'm going Terrace Marshall.
I like it. He's sort of that rare receiver with he's got all the he's tall. He's got the weight on him, but he's also fast as well. Yeah. I think he's got a big catch radius. And as you said sort of previously when you nearly took him earlier in that offense, he had some pretty good wide receivers in front of him. Really, he had Jamar Chase, he had Justin Jefferson, and he's still got a lot of touchdowns, a lot of targets. So that injury aside, I think it could be a fantastic signing for somebody. And I think Ryan Tannehill has got a lot better at the deep ball as well, so he maybe gives them a bit more of a threat there as well. Maybe take some of the attention off AJ Brown and open up that offense a bit. I like it. Offensive players are sexier than defense, are they? They are tackles or anything like that. So
it's a much more offensive sort of stacked board than draft this year, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
It's definitely the sexier pick, and also sexier than tackle.
Definitely
we'll go wide receiver. So that's pick 23 now with the New York Jets second pick.
So this one with the Jets, obviously they've got needs everywhere. We're assuming they took Zach Wilson at 2, and didn't manage to knacker that one up. So they've got another pick here. So I think for me, where I'm going to go, not necessarily an easy decision. It's so tempting when you are playing this game to save a player for somebody else further down the line that you really think they would fit well at. So I really wanted to save Jaylen Phillips for the Jets. I think the Jets need edge. I don't think they've had an edge rusher since John Abraham in 2005. I can't remember the last time they had a decent edge rusher. I think they need to improve that defense. I think offensively, I think they're looking reasonably decent at this point. They could potentially pick up a running back later on in the draft. You've got Zach Wilson in there. You've got some good wide receivers. I think Denzel Mims is going to be very good this year. So I'm going to ignore offense. There is a potential for, you could go corner. Do I really like any of the corners that are there at the moment? Kayla Farley, I do like, but we've sort of talked about his injury issues with his back problems. I know a lot of people are quite high on Greg Newsome outside of Northwestern. But for me, I think I want to give them a decent edge rusher. It then becomes a question of who I rate higher. So there's Jason Ower. if that's how we're saying it, who's sat out there. I mean, he's very raw. He's not really played that many games at this point in his career. He played 8 games last season, I think. He's got all the sort of the attributes there. I think, to be honest, though, I'm going to go with, and this probably isn't from my eyes, this is more from other people's mocks. I'm going to give them Quitty Pay from Michigan, I think, at this point, and give them an edge rusher.
He certainly looks the part, doesn't he? Did you see his pro day?
I didn't actually know.
He looks he ran his 40-yard dash without his top, and
I did see that.
You could stack him next to DK Metcalf, and he wouldn't look out of place. So the guy's a bit of a beast to look at. And I mean, like you say, he's the measurables are all there, and he's kind of got the athleticism definitely and the strength. I think he bench pressed something crazy. The talent is all there. He's just another one again. When I watched the edge class, I said this before, didn't I? I just didn't see them emerge. I couldn't. I can't get on board with some of the things that I read and hear about this edge class in terms of some of their talents. But I think he's probably the number one edge left on the board at this point. So I think in that regard, I think it's a good pick.
Rousseau, after his pro day, dropped down the board for me. To be honest, I'm not sold on Ower. I know a lot of people are, but he just didn't have that experience. Pay was a start for 4 seasons.
Yeah,
didn't have a lot of sacks. I think he had 11.5. But he's got all those ingredients like you've just said. So yeah, he's probably the top remaining one for me. So he goes to the Jets.
Okay, so pick 24, Pittsburgh Steelers. This is an interesting one. I've seen and heard and read so much here about what the fans and what everybody thinks the Steelers should do. But as we know, and as I keep piping on about, I'm much more about the PFF side, the analytics and all of that. And that screams you don't take running backs in the first round. You just don't do it. The value's not there. I totally understand that, they're crying out for a running back. And there's some really good ones in this draft, some that I really, really like. But I can't do it. I can't do it in the first round. When the Chiefs did it last year, I was extremely annoyed, even though
you were. I can vouch for that.
Even though I liked Clyde Edwards-Helaire and also Jonathan Taylor as well, I loved, but there's just more value. The only thing I like about taking a running back in the first round, the only thing is that 5th-year option and the fact that running backs don't have a lot of longevity. So to get them on the cheap for a 5th year, I think is a good thing, as opposed to having to pay them like the likes of Zeke and things who've got so much money and then just gone off the boil a little bit, and all they have to do is go off the boil a little bit and the value just tanks. So I think that's the only reason what I would do, and the only saving grace in the Chiefs pick for me last year. So I can't do it to the Steelers. So on that basis, I think their offensive line is just it's aging and it's not great in my book. I was looking at the depth chart earlier, and I've not even heard, I don't think, of the 2 tackles that they've got penciled in there at the moment, Okorafor and Zach Banner. I mean, maybe I have heard of them, but certainly they're not starting caliber tackles. I think we're going to have to go tackle for me here. And just looking at the board, we've got Walker Little out of Stanford, and then Tevin Jenkins are the 2 kind of highest rated on PFF's board. And Walker Little, I think, is the guy who's played very little over the last 2 years, I think it is. I think he got injured in 2019, didn't play at all in 2020. And even back in 2018, grade-wise, he didn't look good. I haven't seen a lot of USC tape, so I must admit I don't really have huge opinions on Walker Little myself, but I think the consensus to me is that Tevin Jenkins is a better prospect, so I'm going to go Tevin Jenkins at this point.
No, I like it. I think, I share your concerns with Walker Little. I think I read the other day he played something like 72 snaps, I think, in the previous previous 2 years. So no matter how good his sophomore tape is, for me, you need to see something
sort
of a lot more recent than that, really.
Yeah. You don't know what he's been doing for the last 2 years, do you? I mean, he could be, he might not be looking after himself. You just don't know. And again, I'm worried by Walker Little, so I'm going to skip over him for sure. Pick Tevin Jenkins.
I think Tevin Jenkins, great player. Everything I've read about him, I think he's ready to start now. I think probably play across the line.
A lot of people seem to have him mocked to Miami, sort of the bottom of the first round, a few picks earlier. And the main, I think, thought process there is that obviously we talk about left tackles, don't we? They get all the praise because generally they're protecting the blind side. But obviously with Tua being a left-handed quarterback,
he will be protecting his blind side.
His blind side is the right-hand side, and that's where Tevin Jenkins played all his football. So I do like the theory there, and I think if that ends up happening, it'll be obviously good for Miami and for Tua. But in our mock here, he's going to the Steelers. So that leads pick 25, the Jacksonville Jaguars again. So I get to see what you're going to do here with the second pick.
I mean, this is why I would be an absolutely terrible GM, because
you're going to go running back, aren't you?
No, I'm not. No. I do think we should look to pick up a running back, though. I know James Robinson had a very good year, but he was an undrafted free agent. He had 96% of our carries. We had nobody else on the depth chart at all. I would like to see us take a running back, but with the amount of picks that we've got, we've got another 2 picks coming up in the second round. I think you could nab. Am I giving away my top running back? Maybe not. Maybe we'll leave that for a later one. But I think you can nab the top running back at potentially, pick 33. I'd be okay with that. It's not a massive position of need, but you give Trevor Jenkins another decent running back. You've got Robinson there. You've got somebody that's a bit of a, maybe better at the backfield. That really opens it up. So it is tempting. It's also everything's tempting. I mean, we need a tight end, but obviously Kyle Pitts is the only first round talent here. There's no way you can take any of the other tight ends at that point. I like the idea of taking a tackle. I do. We've got Cam Robinson, who we franchise tag, a left tackle who's not been great, but I understand why we franchise tagged him, because we didn't want to be left out of the offensive tackle stakes basically and just end up with nobody. So I'm okay with that decision. So we've got him for a year. In the meantime, we can very easily replace him and look to upgrade potentially and see how that goes. We've got Jawan Taylor at right tackle. Been there for a while now, not overly convinced. So that's definitely a consideration. Rookie quarterback, give him a nice brand new tackle. Maybe play him at guard initially, and you can move him around, ease him in. I mean, there's a wide receiver as well. I don't think it's a need, but you can never have too many good wide receivers. But again, I think there's other ones later on in the draft. If they wanted to go that way, they could pick. There's multiple places we could go. If I wasn't that scared of Kayla Farley's injuries, I would possibly go Kayla Farley. There's still Sante Samuel Jr. sat out there. Probably the only position we're sat at is linebacker, where we're very strong. Which all leads me to the position that I haven't mentioned. And this isn't a sexy pick, and this is kind of being a bit more sensible about it. We need help in the safety. We definitely need help in the safety. And I think for me, that means we take Trevon Moehrig, safety from TCU. I think that is the sensible pick there. He's very good at pass defense. He's played a ton of coverages in their defense. He just looks really good from everything I've seen of him. He's hard hitting. I think he wasn't maybe a defensive leader in their defense. I like everything I've read about him. I've seen him mocked a lot higher, to the fact that he's still sat here as well. Massive position of need, and I think everything I've read about him and seen of him, I think he'd be an excellent pick.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's not safety's not really a sexy pick, is it? Ever? It's just one of those. Yeah, okay. But I do think that the Jags, have a need there, and like you say, he's somewhat of a slip down our board here and our draft. So I think the need and the kind of the rank really kind of marry up in your favor really here, and I think it's it's a nice pick. That's where I would have gone with that pick in this draft, definitely.
Yeah, and then I'm hoping we can, at tight end, potentially, I think Pat Fryermuth might be a possibility definitely at 33 or something. That's too high, maybe 45. We'd probably be reaching for him there, but I think we need to go and get a tight end. It depends where you have your tight ends ranked, but we definitely need a tight end.
I've seen Fryermuth mocked here to the Jags before.
Yeah, that's too rich for me, though.
It's way too rich. Even if you're gonna dress him up and try and tell me he's baby Gronk, I still don't think it's still don't think you pick him at 25. So no, I think Lorig's the right pick there. Okay, so that takes us to pick 26, the Cleveland Browns. Sneakily, one of the kind of best rosters in football at the moment. The Browns, they seem to be solid across the board. Looking at their depth chart, and there's not too many holes. To be perfectly honest, I like a lot of their team. And so they should, because they've been picking at the top of the draft for so many years, having so many first-round picks. And I think the current regime have started to finally hit on those picks and get things right and build solidly. The only place actually that jumps out at me as being somewhat of a need. They've got a lot of bodies in the wide receiver room, but I'm not so sure there's that much talent in the wide receiver room. We know that obviously Beckham and Landry are both good wide receivers, but Beckham hasn't performed as a Brown, and he doesn't seem to have that chemistry with Baker Mayfield. I like Landry, but outside of that, you're talking Donovan Peoples-Jones, Rashard Higgins, Derek Willis, who they're just names really. I don't see a huge amount of production there. So I am tempted by wide receiver, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if they went wide receiver here. But the only other slight hole I see, or again when I'm looking and I'm just seeing names, as opposed to kind of stars or people I've heard a lot about, is at linebacker, and inside linebacker really. And again, I'm probably giving things away here, but one of my favorite players throughout this scouting process for me, is a linebacker out of somewhat of a small school, who goes by the name of Zayvon Collins.
So glad you said that.
And he, why are you looking to pick somebody else after me?
No. This is exactly the pick I would have made. Exactly.
Right, yeah. Nick Bolton here, as you can see, is higher on PFF's board, and he's higher on a number of boards, but I cannot get on board with Nick Bolton in the slightest. I think he looks small. He doesn't seem to be able to read where the ball is when I've watched him.
Zayvon Collins is not small.
No, and Zayvon Collins is anything but small. Maybe he's not the best technically, and then maybe there's maybe a little bit rough around the edges, but the guy is a beast, and he stood out at Tulsa like a man among boys. And if you're gonna play at a smaller school and get drafted high, you've got to stand out, and he certainly does that. He looks like an absolute beast. And as I say, one of the best and funnest, certainly defensive players I scouted this year. I absolutely love him. So I'm going to go, and it's somebody who earlier on in the kind of draft process I was mocking to the Chiefs, because we've had a need at inside linebacker for a number of years. Obviously, we don't have a first round pick anymore, so it's kind of irrelevant. But that's where I'm going. I'm going Zayvon Collins, linebacker, Tulsa.
No, absolutely love it. He's an absolute freak. 6'4", 260 pounds. He's still got that speed and that quickness, I think, of some of the more undersized linebackers. I think potentially you could have him coming off the edge and blitzing a little bit if you needed to. That was the only other position I'd be tempted by at edge. I know they brought in Devon Clowney, but I absolutely love that pick, Mark. Exactly what I would have made. And Zayvon Collins, absolutely.
Have you seen those two walk-off touchdowns he scored? It was an interception to end the game in one game, and then he returned an interception for a touchdown to win a game, I think.
Right.
Total game changer. And again, they're highlights and all the rest of it, but you don't have to look at the highlight film. Just put on one of his tapes against anybody, and he just stands out. He just jumps out. He's a freak. So I love him. I'm really pleased you made that, because like I say, I really rate him too, and I think it's perfect. Could put them over the top. I saw the
The PFF article the other day where they had rated the Browns as having the second best roster in the league as of this moment.
They're up there, aren't they?
They're
They're definitely up there. And again, a lot of it will come back down to how good Baker plays and what they do get out offensively. But that running game is so strong that he won't hopefully have to do a great deal. And I think that division's there for the taking. I think for them this year.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So, on to although the Ravens can do something about it with 2 first-round picks. So here you go. You have a chance here to help the Ravens.
I know, and I'll be honest, I don't particularly like the Ravens. I don't really want to help them, but and I've got both of their picks, haven't I? Which is excellent. So they're going to take punter. No.
I'm okay with that because I don't like the Ravens either.
I don't know why. I really don't know why. I've never really warmed to them. But anyway, that's by the by. Personal biases aside. So I think obviously they've got a need at wide receiver. Marquise Brown, very boom or bust. I don't think he's very good. The other problem is when you take a receiver if you're a receiver at the Ravens, I would not want to be a receiver taken by the Ravens because you're going to have to do a hell of a lot of blocking. You're maybe not going to be involved that often. On that I think they also probably have a bit of a need across the offensive line as well. Maybe just sort of opening up some more of those running lanes and bolstering there. Obviously, they've lost Orlando to the Chiefs. So that's now an area for me that they need to look to improve on. They've got Ronnie Stanley at left tackle, who's obviously been superb, but they need to be sort of looking to pick that up to cover off Orlando Brown's loss. Edge, I think, is a need. They tried having Yannick Ngakoue in last year, and that didn't really work out. There's a number of different places you could go, and I think at this point I'm probably going to go with. Do I really like any of the edge rushers that are available? Not overly at this point. Do they give me good value? Not really. I think at this point I'm probably going to go wide receiver. I think for the Ravens that's probably a bigger need, and then address probably offensive line later on, depending on sort of where you go with some of your picks, and don't let that feed into sort of what you will take. But I think I'm going to go Rashad Bateman out of Minnesota here for the Ravens. I think he's a very physical player, which I think will help them. He's probably the top wideout that's kind of I think is kind of left on the board at this level. I think he's what they need. I think he's plug and play. I think he can go straight away, and I think he immediately upgrades their receiving core, and then we look to address everything else lower down the draft. He can play sort of inside and outside. He breaks some tackles.
I think I agree. The fact that they need a wide receiver, definitely. I think, like you said there, I don't think any wide receiver getting drafted to Baltimore these days are very happy. And also, I think it's a graveyard from a fantasy point of view as well.
100%, definitely. Yeah.
So, certainly any wide receivers I've got my eye on for fantasy, I don't want them getting drafted by the Ravens. Otherwise, I'm probably not going to take them. To be perfectly honest, I think we know that Bateman's probably not too high on my board compared to some people, as we discussed earlier. But I do think there's value there. I would just, though, if we're going to go wide receiver for them, or if I was picking wide receiver for the Ravens, one name that I would potentially think would be a good fit for maybe different reasons is Rondell Moore, because yes, he's not necessarily going to be blocking for you and doing those kind of things that maybe you might get out of Bateman, but I think he's more of a gadget person, and in that offense, and the fact that they, run their RPOs and their screens and things like that, and just the crazy plays and the crazy offense that the Ravens kind of employ at times. I'm thinking he might be a good fit from that point of view. Maybe even in the backfield sometimes, things like that, gadgety, would potentially be a pick. But I totally understand the need for wide receiver. So yeah, it makes sense. Right, pick 28, the New Orleans Saints. So the Saints have been in kind of like win now mode for a while when they had obviously Drew Brees there, and they're trying to eke out another Super Bowl before he kind of hung his boots up. And I think they're strong in certain areas of Saints, but I also think they've got some holes really. I do think that if you're going to have Jameis Winston slinging the ball around, though, I want him to have some targets. I was kind of hoping that Bateman was going to be here at this point. I was hoping to take him here for the Saints, I'll be honest with you. Because again, yes, they've got Michael Thomas, one of my favorite wide receivers in the league. I think he's an absolute beast. Outside of that, I don't think there's too much really. Traquan Smith, maybe is your number 2, but again, I mentioned him just a second ago, Rondell Moore, and that Sean Payton and his offensive mind, I think, could work wonders for Rondell Moore. I think people like Sean Payton and Andy Reid, with the offenses that they run and how original they can be at times, I think are good matches for people like Rondell Moore, because he's not going to be for everybody. What is he? Something like 5'8" or something like ridiculous like that. And he's absolutely tiny. But I do think
normal height, that Mark. That's nothing wrong with that.
Not for an NFL footballer though, maybe.
All right, yeah, fair enough.
So yeah, it might not be a popular pick among some people, and I think a lot of people don't have Rondell Moore as a first round pick. And yeah, maybe he isn't, but I think, as I say, from a gadgety point of view, I think you're going to need to help Winston out this year. And I think the more he throws the ball downfield, the more picks he's going to throw. So maybe if he's throwing screens, a little bit more screens, a little bit more inside, that kind of thing, maybe he can become kind of less prone to interceptions. So I'm going to go Rondell Moore, wide receiver, Purdue.
So yeah, no, I really like that pick. I think that's a really, really good pick. Like you say, he's probably not for everybody. He's undersized, but if anybody can use him, Sean Payton can use him. I like the idea of. I assume Jameis will start as well, but I think we'll see a bit of Taysom Hill too. But giving somebody to throw the ball to, they've got very little of that position outside of Michael Thomas, who you're right is an absolute beast. And I remember you sort of pounding the table for him years back when they drafted him. So yeah, really, I think, as you said as well, they've been in win now mode for a number of years. Their overall roster's fairly strong. So yeah, why not have maybe a slight luxury pick there and maybe a slight reach? But no, I like it. Good pick.
So pick 29, Green Bay Packers.
So this is the time where you sort of play the game of, I'm Brian Gutekunst. What can I do to not take a wide receiver for Aaron Rodgers here? But luckily, in our draft, he's been helped out quite a lot by the fact that we've just had a little bit of a run on them. And wide receiver is where I was leaning to, but don't really think there's anybody I have rated that highly. I'd probably, if I was them, wait until later on in the draft. There is Kadarius Toney still sitting there, which is a possibility. I think for me, I'm going to go cornerback. Having watched them last season, I think in the NFC Championship game, Kevin King just got absolutely toasted. It was embarrassing. It was an absolutely terrible performance. So for me, they need to be improving that secondary. So that then leaves me with probably the top two. Kayla Farley, again, let's not go over it, but injury problems. You've got Greg Newsome there. That said, obviously quite a lot of people like, so it's a bit of a toss-up there. I am a bit conflicted. Everything I've said about Farley does still stand. I think they are very close. I think Newsome also has a bit of an injury history as well. He's missed some games. So I think in this one, I'm going to go with the better player, I believe, and try and sort of forget some of this injury side of it. So I'm going to go with Caleb Farley, cornerback out of Virginia Tech. I think he potentially, if he'd not had the injury problems, he could have been top 10. Could have been a lot higher up the board. I think if he can stay healthy, and they think he'll be back practicing after, late July, August. So he should be available for the season beginning as long as there's no setbacks. I think he's a fantastic player. He's obviously not played a game of football for a very, very long time, but he's got the size for it as well. I think quite a lot of teams seem to like him from what I'm hearing as well. So I'm gonna go Kayla Farley over Craig Newsome there.
Yeah, no, I think like you say, I think if we would, NFL teams will either have him on their board or they won't. I think it'll be as simple as that. He'll be if somebody they are prepared to select or they're not. And if you're prepared to select him, I think it's an absolute steal at 29 because, like you say, the early part of this process, the Cowboys were nailed on at number 10 ahead of Patrick Surtain. So I think there's this huge value there if you're comfortable with the injury. If you're not comfortable with the injury, he won't even be on your board and you'll just take Newsome, like you say. I think this is where Newsome's kind of value comes in at this pick. So if they had to take him, I think it would also be a good pick. I don't think you'll go wrong with Newsome at 29 in the draft. I think it's good value there. And like you say, Kevin King got absolutely mullered, didn't he?
He was
late
awful.
on in the season. He looked absolutely awful. They definitely need help there. And again, like you say, you've been able to make that pick because there's just no wide receivers left. I'm really not a Kadarius Toney fan.
No.
I don't really see that. Well, no, I do in the same. If you think he's just a pure slot guy, then fine. But people are talking about him, and he's 6 foot. I think he's 6'1" or something, or 6 foot, saying that he can play on the outside. I just don't see that. So yeah. So I think Kayla Farley's. I think it's a great pick, great value for the Packers at that point. So that leaves my pick 30 then, the Buffalo Bills. Obviously they're going to be probably the Chiefs' main rival for the next few years. So I'm not sure how strong I want to make them pick, to be honest. But I think having looked through their roster, the one area of need that stands out to me is at edge, and I think, or on the defensive line, full stop, really. I think you touched on it before, or maybe we both did, about the fact that the interior defensive line this year talent is really lacking. It's really, really poor. There is one guy I like in the later rounds who I think there's huge potential. Not going to give too much away there, but certainly we're not picking him in the first round. So I think we're back to the edge class, really. And I think at this point, if Jason Oweh was actually available at pick 30, I think the Bills would run this ticket in quite fast, because I think, again, he's a bit of a freak athletically. And I think I would like to think that the Bills would be able to, coach him up and get some of the stats out of him, some of the actual play out of him that it probably is athleticism. Kind of deserves, really. I think this is where the edge value is in this first round, and I think whoever's left out of the top 3 or 4, if you're picking them later in round 1, I think you're getting good value. So yeah, I'm going to go Jason Oweh, Penn State.
Yeah, good shout. I think like you've just, for every reason you've just said, I think it's a massive need for them. They're going to be your major rivals. It's something that can make them even stronger. Their offense is obviously looking strong, and everything that's built on that defense, and let's improve that. I think, Oweh he's a very good player. He's got all the skills, he's got all the range. It does worry me that he's maybe not played that many games, he's maybe not got that experience, but a lot of people are very high on him and everything. And I think you're right, a lot of mocks have him going a lot higher than here, so it would be an absolute steal for them, and they would run it in. Definitely.
Yeah. So pick 31 then. This is the second pick of the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously the pick that they've just recently acquired from the Chiefs for trading their tackle Orlando Brown, not Bloom, Orlando Brown to the Chiefs. I wanted to just very quickly touch on this before you make the pick, because obviously the trade happened the other day, and I was expecting the Chiefs to be picking here at 31. And I've been kind of mulling over this trade over the last couple of days, trying to get my head around it, really, and what it means. And I think because it's quite complicated in that there's multiple picks, multiple years worth of picks and different rounds and all sorts. I think when you boil it down, it essentially is a late first, early second round pick that we've given up for Orlando Brown, which on face value, he was a third round pick coming out of college himself. I think people were high on him, but he then went to the combine and looked like, the biggest unathletic person you'd ever seen at the combine. He had an atrocious combine, and it kind of dropped him down a little bit. So he was a third round pick that's kind of come good. Been playing right tackle for the Ravens for a few years and looked decent. And then obviously, like you said, they lost Ronnie Stanley to injury last year, and so he had to step in at left tackle, which is where he wants to play, where his dad played in the NFL. He was banging the table for, if you're not going to play me at left tackle, I want to be traded. He's got his wish. My major concern is that we're going to have to pay him if we're going to keep him. And again, we're up at the top of the cap already. Yes, it goes up next year, but I think I've got some slight concerns there about how much money he'll want and we'll have to give him in order to keep him. But that being said, if we were to just get one stellar season out of him and we win a Super Bowl and we let him go, I wouldn't be bothered by that. I think for a late first, a 1 year, it's almost like a 1 year rental, if you like. I wouldn't be massively adverse to that. And obviously what they're doing is they're paying for the known factor here as opposed to picking one of the tackles that are left at this point. You mentioned it earlier in the podcast that I'm quite high on the Texas tackle, Samuel Cosme. I thought he would have been a good pick at this point. He's really athletic. He reminded me a little bit of Eric Fisher coming out.
We'll be hearing more about him shortly, Mark.
That's where I thought the Chiefs would have gone at this point. But so it was an intriguing trade for me, and I quite like what's gone down there and the certainty that Brown will obviously bring. But what that does mean is it means obviously the Ravens get to pick a second time here. So take it away. What do you think they should do?
Well, I think just to sort of go back to the Chiefs side of thing, I think that's what they've done. They've obviously gone for that certainty and everything. But now you've got, I think you've got a very good, offensive line now. Having looked slightly shaky sort of previously, it's really changed things. So you've got you are sorry.
Slightly shaky, Jesus!
I looked incredibly shaky. Yeah. So you've got Orlando Brown left tackle. You've got Joe Thuney. Left guard, I think it's a very good signing in free agency. Austin Blythe at centre, so you've switched out your Austins there. I forget your right guard, and I assume you're going to play Mike Remmers at right tackle. Is it?
Yeah, so right guard will either be
if Duvernay Tardif comes back, I guess.
Yeah, so the doctor will either come back or he won't from his COVID duty, or we've got what's he called? The guy who was retired who came.
Oh, Kyle Long, haven't you?
Kyle Long.
Yes.
So obviously he's coming back out of retirement, which is, I suppose you're never going to be 100% certain what you're going to get there. But
he's experienced and he's been around, hasn't he?
Yeah, exactly. And then, like you say, currently it's Remmers at right tackle, who he played well at right tackle. It was when he had to shift over to left tackle that he got killed. So he had been playing okay. So I don't think there's as much of a need there, but it still wouldn't surprise me if we took if Cosme or Radunz or Little or Leatherwood or any of those people are anywhere near our pick at 58, I think we would probably snap one of them up as well. In the second round. But I quite like what they've done, the Chiefs. So.
And if anybody wants more information on it, Peter King breaks it down very well in his Football Monitor America column from this week about how the trade came together. So go and check that out. If you want a bit more information on that, it's quite interesting where they got to with it.
Cool.
Bit of a recommendation. So anyway, getting back to the draft, I apologise. A little bit of a spoiler alert as well, but I think at this point you'd mentioned that you would be taking Sam Cosme, so I have the Ravens taking Samuel Cosme, the tackle out of Texas at this point.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Because, sorry to interrupt, that's really interesting because obviously we're going to be able to directly compare how Orlando Brown looks for the Chiefs and how Cosme plays for the Ravens, and go, if Cosme plays really well, even if Brown is excellent, if Cosme plays really well, everyone will be like slating the Chiefs because it's like, well, you could have had 5 years of that on a nothing salary versus what you've got. So I might now, if that did come to fruition, I might be cheering for Cosme to maybe not play so well. But
no, I totally agree. I'll be honest, I was a little bit naughty because that's kind of why I did it. Because I think it would be interesting if that did play out. I would like to see it, but I do think Cosme looked excellent. I know you spoke about him glowingly a couple of weeks ago on the podcast. I went away and sort of read up a bit more about him, looked at him, and I liked everything I saw. He just gives you, I think, what the Ravens need is a bit of versatility along that offensive line as well. So, Stanley does get injured, he does go down. Cosme can play anywhere. He started 34 games at tackle for Texas, played 21 at left tackle, he played 13 at right tackle. He can basically play, I think, anywhere along that line other than centre. You can just plug him in and he would just give you production. So I just think,
steady progression in his career as well in terms of how he played. He got better every year, and I think that's a really good sign of from tackles particularly, because as they get older, they tend to get better just by the nature of the position. They get stronger and they learn more, etc. And I think the fact that he's improved steadily over his years at Texas, I think, stand him in good stead. I think he's going to be a really, really good player.
I mean, you can see that from his PFF grade. So in 2018, he was 79.7 blocking grade. 2019, 83.9, and then 2020, he got up to 90.8.
Yeah.
So you can see that progression kind of going through as you've just pulled up there. So I'm picking Sam Cosme to go to the Ravens.
Good pick. So that leads me to round out the mock here with the pick 32 for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I'm not going to go sour grapes and do anything silly like that, just because I am going to take it semi-serious. But on a serious note, they again are they must be one of the strongest rosters in the league, because they've won the Super Bowl and they've managed to keep the entire team together. So if they're not the favourites, for the Super Bowl this year, I don't know why they're not. They're a very well-rounded team. So in theory they could go anywhere. So my first kind of protocol is to look at the draft board and kind of reconnect with that and say, well, who's the highest ranked player that we've got left? And you've got a cornerback that PFF here have got ranked at number 20. We've talked about him already, Greg Newsome. I think he's a really good player, so he's certainly in contention for me. Asante Samuel, I think what I thought would be kind of cool if you went the Samuel route is apparently Brady played with his dad, Asante Samuel Sr., obviously. So that would be a kind of cool news story, and it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if that actually came true. There's obviously a couple of tackles there. But outside of that, there's nothing glaring to me. So I think I am going to go corner, and I think I'm going to go again. They're going to be in games where Brady's going to put up points. Other teams are presumably going to have to score points in order to stay with them. And I think you can never have too many corners. Full stop. In the NFL, they've got two really good safeties in Winfield, two really young safeties in Winfield and Whitehead. But I think at corner, yes, they've taken corners in recent years, but I don't know that they're necessarily kind of standout stars. So I think I'd be stocking up on corners here. So I'm going to take Greg Newsome out of Northwestern.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, at this point, Jason Light can just go best player available. As you say, they're so strong. They've returned all 11 starters on offense from the Super Bowl victory. I know Antonio Brown is still sitting out there, but I don't think technically he started, nor did he play that big of a part for me. And at his age, and the everything he brings to the team, not necessarily in a good way. They've not really missed him much. So I think, as you say, Greg Newsome's obviously highest on the PFF board. Always, perhaps a bit of a steal. I know some people have him going a lot higher as well. In terms of needs, I mean, probably a need is quarterback, but there's nobody here that you would take. I can see them taking a developmental player, maybe a Trask or a Mills or a Mond or somebody later on in sort of the draft. I'm feeling a need there. The only thing that I did think, and it would be a luxury pick, I'm not sold on Ronald Jones. I'm not sold on Leonard Fournette for obvious reasons. So I wouldn't be shocked if they just wanted to run it back one more time and they really liked one of the running backs. So I think if I had this pick, I'd have been tempted to take Javonte Williams out of North Carolina.
Yeah.
Would be probably, but again, that is a luxury, and I agree. You should be looking maybe further to the future. But the other, if this is Brady's last year, let's give him another weapon and let's just make doubly sure of it. But no, I can't argue with Greg Newsome as a pick there.
No, it's interesting. Like you say, I think the obviously quarterback for the future is something that they need to be looking at, because despite what it looks like, he cannot go on forever. He can't go on for too many more years. So that is obviously a pick. But at this point, with the top 5 quarterbacks gone, you're not going to be picking one in the first round, I don't think. Not unless they have one of those sort of second-tiered quarterbacks ranked really highly, because again, you get the 5th-year option, I guess. So they could think about that. But I totally agree that, running back is a potential. I would never do that, as I said before, on running backs, really. I think there's value to be had before. And the other thing that stopped me really there was I think that they signed Giovanni Bernard as well, didn't they, recently? And I'm not saying he's kind of like a stud or anything, but I think he gives Brady some of what Brady likes in terms of a pass-catching running back. And I think with the other two, Jones and Fournette, it wouldn't surprise me if they shared the kind of the bulk of the carries, and Bernard ended up being like the third down back. So although somebody like Javonte Williams could probably do all of that himself, it's kind of not really where the NFL goes so much these days, is it? They tend to not have one kind of bell cow. So I think that's why I would go. I think I'd stock up on the corners and
I agree,
make it difficult for other teams to score points on you, and you'll win a lot of games if you can keep people under 20 points. With Brady at quarterback, it becomes somewhat easy.
Definitely.
So that about concludes the Fourth and Whinges mock draft. Anything else you want to kind of touch on? Anybody you kind of surprised that didn't get picked when you refresh the board, Rob, or any other kind of outstanding sort of comments you want to point out at this point?
I don't know. I just think it's really interesting doing the mock draft with somebody else, and because you can become blinded, you can just pick the players you like. As I sort of alluded to earlier, you can tend to sort of save up some players for later on and think, I really want to pair. I think earlier on when you were sort of putting some mock drafts out, you were not determined, but Kyle Pitts to the Cowboys makes all the sense in the world, and trying to sort of project that, fall into certain traps. It was interesting because I think you sort of stole a couple of my picks a couple of times. I probably did the same thing to you. It was interesting. I thought it was also funny to see Penei Sewell falling all the way to 11. A lot of people have him as the best non-quarterback in the draft, or maybe perhaps even the best player in the draft. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. In terms of the players that weren't picked, I'm sure there'll be loads that we won't have gone. I think a lot of teams are very high on Nick Bolton, like you said. Kadarius Toney, I think, could possibly go in the first round. Gregory Rousseau, I think, maybe is almost a lock to go in the first round, to be perfectly honest, just because of sort of some of the other things I've seen. I think Carlos Basham's quite highly rated. He's probably a bit raw, but I could see him sneaking in. You mentioned Asante Samuel. I'm just basically naming all the players that are still left now. But I think, certainly we've gone higher on some than others seem to be. But I guess we're not going to know until we see it all play out. I'd be shocked if Mac Jones did fall to the Patriots at 15. Obviously, we've just done the one trade in this draft. I can foresee quite a lot of trades coming up in the early rounds. But I think it's just going to be fascinating, and it's going to be really interesting, and very excited to see it. Can't wait.
Yeah, no, definitely. I share some of those. I think those thoughts. I think, like you say, I think if the quarterbacks go where we've got them in terms of the picks, not necessarily the teams, but the picks, I'll be shocked. That what I'm hearing in the last 24 hours is that the 49ers are nailed on to take Trey Lance, which obviously throws everything that we were talking about, but kind of up in the air, and makes us look a bit silly. And like you said, there's no way realistically that Mac Jones is going to fall all the way to 15. It just won't happen. But I think, again, we're doing what we kind of would do for each of these teams, and for the reasons that we talked about. So don't be surprised at all if the Patriots trade up for Mac Jones. Absolutely not. I wouldn't be surprised by that. Don't be surprised if like you said, there's multiple trades early doors to snap up all those quarterbacks. Wouldn't surprise me in the slightest, because that's what happens with quarterbacks. But again, we were trying to look at it more about what we would do in that moment and where we see the value. So that's why it maybe looks a little bit different. I think, like you say, I think it's a really good exercise to do a mock draft with multiple people, because it looks very different to any of the mocks that I've done previously, and that's because, like you say, you maybe nick a player here, and that has a knock-on effect on what I'm thinking for that particular team, and it's really good. And like you said, we ultimately have players ranked differently, and therefore, my top 5 looks different to your top 5. So you do see players kind of popping up. I'm going to get absolutely mullered, I think, for a couple of picks here. I'm thinking particularly the Vikings pick. I think I'll probably get a bit of grief for that. But like you said at the time, I think what I've done is I've kind of stayed true to my board, and my board is that I'm really high on that player, and he's edge. It's a position of real value in the NFL. And he's my top-rated edge defender. And yes, he's not a Chase Young, like I said earlier. He's not going to be one of these elite pass rushers. I'm not saying he is, but if he's their best pass rusher, then I think there's value in that. And I think so that's that. And in terms, like you say, with some of the people that we've got left, there's always some crazy picks in the first round. Seattle are normally the ones, or Oakland are normally the ones who were making those crazy picks.
I think of Oakland taking Damon Arnett last year. I don't think anybody saw that coming. No. So
Seahawks obviously haven't picked in this because they don't have a first round pick. So maybe it won't be quite as crazy without them in the first round. But like you said, I think Kadarius Toney is probably going to be taken in the first round for what I'm hearing. Gregory Rousseau, again, edge, potentially could go. And also Walker Little. I think there are a lot of NFL teams that are really high on him. He's our kind of top-rated player that we didn't pick. And I think that probably won't happen. But I think it's been a really good exercise. Hopefully those people listening in, you've enjoyed it. By all means, kind of, let us know what you think, how you think we've picked, how you think we've destroyed your team's draft pick or whatever it may be. We do now have a Twitter account and an email that you can get in touch if you wanted to do that. So the Twitter handle is simply @4thandwhinges, with and being the word as opposed to an ampersand, so just 4th and Whinges. And the email is 4thandwhingespodcast@gmail.com, again with the written and as opposed to an ampersand. That's scrolling across the screen here on YouTube for those people watching it there. So by all means, feel free to get in touch. It'd be great to hear from anybody with their comments, good or bad.
I was just going to say, Matt, before we go, what's your over-under on how many picks we will get right? What's your feeling?
How many picks we will get right, as in picks to...
As in the position they are taken.
The position that they're taken. Oh, gosh.
So Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson, I would say we've got nailed. I mean, then after that, I've got no confidence whatsoever. I'm going to say if we get 4 or 5, we'll have done.
I was going to say if we get 6, we'll have been doing amazing. I think players at teams is a bit easier. And I think if you get somewhere between 6 and 10, I think you've done really well in a mock draft. I really do. So maybe we can grade ourselves after the draft and see how well we did.
No, we are never speaking of this ever again.
But anyway, that kind of concludes the mock. So we'll leave it there. It's obviously been a bumper episode, so hopefully people have managed to stick with us. It's probably just over 2 hours now, but hopefully, as I say, hopefully it'll be enjoyable. And we'll catch you again next time on the 4th and Whinges podcast. Bye-bye.
Yeah, goodbye.